what I do is important to me. It doesn't matter what anyone else is really telling me, you know? So you have to learn to trust in yourself and be confident in yourself and ignore other people's opinions. If I had to say it bluntly.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 205 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I am excited that you are here. If you are a first-time listener, welcome to the show. I'm excited to get to know you and connect with you in the future, I hope. If this is your 205th episode, I want to thank you so much for listening. I did actually have a few more people who reached out and said that they also had listened to all 200 of the episodes when I reached out about speaking about that. And so it's been kind of cool to see how many people have actually spoken out and said, hey, I've listened to all of them. Caroline Brooks Johnson and Laura Taglianetti, hope I said that right. Thank you both for saying that you have listened to all 200 episodes, and hopefully it's 205 at this point. I appreciate you, and let's get on to today's episode. So today I am very excited to introduce you to Beatie Deutsch. She is the Israeli national champion in the marathon, half marathon, 2:32 marathoner. She's run 1:15 and a half. She is the mother of five kids, and is in ultra-Orthodox Judaism, in which modest dress is required. We are going to talk a bit about that. She's kind of known for running, beating people, being alongside these men that kind of don't expect her to be there, yet she is wearing this modest dress. And she also is known for running a marathon 7 months pregnant in a skirt and a long sleeve, and she still managed to run just over 4 hours, which is pretty amazing. And I couldn't even run at all my final few weeks and could barely run for 20 minutes without walking and without stopping towards the end of my pregnancy. So I'm just really blown away that she was able to do that. But Beatie is someone who you guys have been recommending for years. She is one of the most requested guests, and I kept getting these requests in, but I get so many requests in that I have this list of people that I like to go through from time to time. And I went through it recently and I saw how many times she'd been recommended. And also I asked earlier in the year, who do you recommend? And her name came up over and over and over again. So this is long overdue, but I am excited to bring her on the show. I'm excited for you to get to know her because she really has a great mindset, a great attitude, a great way of thinking about things. And I learned a lot in this episode from her, and I think you are going to too. And she is a brand new runner as well. She's only been running 4 years. So there's a lot of that energy and enthusiasm, which I think we all need a bit of an injection of with the kind of year that we are having. Now, this is another kind of lighter episode based on, we did have some kind of serious episodes at the beginning of this month and the end of last month. And next week, I will be tackling a more serious topic, and I will tell you a bit more about that at the end of this episode. Now, I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Tracksmith and Athletic Greens, and I will be introducing you to a Black-owned business who actually you have met before. So stay tuned for that. Let's go meet one of our sponsors, and then we'll get right to the episode. Thank you to my friends Athletic Greens for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. Now, this is the all-in-one daily drink to support better health and peak performance. Now, we know even with a balanced diet, it is difficult to cover all of your nutritional bases. That is where Athletic Greens will help. The daily drink is like nutritional insurance in a way for your body that's delivered straight to your door. It's developed from a complex blend of 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food source ingredients. Athletic Greens is a greens powder engineered to help fill the nutritional gaps in your diet. Their daily drink improves your everyday performance by addressing the 4 pillars of health: energy, recovery, gut health, and immune support. Sounds pretty good, right? It's also packed with adaptogens for recovery, probiotics and digestive enzymes for gut health, and vitamin C and zinc citrate for immune support. Athletic Greens is an easy all-in-one solution to help your body meet its nutritional needs. Their highly absorbable powder is diet-friendly, whether you whatever diet you are on, although I'm not a big fan of diets, you will be able to take this all in one drink just every morning. Now, I take it every single morning. It is the first thing I do. I've told you this many times. It's the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning. I stumble down to the kitchen, go get my jug of filtered cold water, pour it into my Athletic Greens glass, put a scoop of that in, give it a shake around and drink it down. That's the first thing I do. I love starting my day that way. It also gives me the confidence to know that even if things do not go that well from there as in terms of what I end up eating, I know that I at least have everything that I need from Athletic Greens, and I'm so thankful to them for that. Now, I want to tell you, friends, when you try Athletic Greens through my podcast, they are also going to give you up to a year's supply of vitamin D3/K2 for free. As we know, we get vitamin D from the sun, and it's often recommended as an important supplement by health experts, particularly in the winter months, which we are, believe it or not, starting to head towards. Athletic Greens vitamin D3/K2 combines these essential nutrients to help support the heart, immune system, and respiratory system. You will get a 1-year supply of that product by visiting athleticgreens.com/Tina to claim my special offer. You'll receive a free D3K2 wellness bundle with your first purchase. That's up to 1 year. All you need to do is go to athleticgreens.com/Tina and go check it out. Beatie, thank you so much for joining me today on the Running for Real podcast. I am excited to have you here. And I have to tell you before you say anything, you are probably one of my most requested guests. I've had so many messages and emails from people. So thank you to those people telling me over the years, you got to have her on, you got to have her on. Although most of them came a few months ago when I wasn't working. So the first opportunity I could, I'm finally doing it. So welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. This is kind of so surreal because I always hear your voice in my car, like, welcome, hello, friends. And now I'm talking to you.
Yes, this is me. It's funny, actually, my neighbors sometimes will be driving back to their house and I'll see them outside and they're like, I'm listening to you. And I'm like, that is just weird. Please stop doing that. Like, don't drive down our street listening to me. But yeah, anyway. Okay, so there's I mentioned to you before we started recording that I knew a little bit about you, very little, although reading up on you or stalking you as I did the last hour. I don't typically read people's Instagram posts in detail before I interview someone because I usually get a few snippets of things and then I'm good with it. But I very much kept getting hooked on your posts and I would read it. And often you, like me, are not too good. And I'm not saying this as anything offensive, but neither of us are particularly good at being concise. So we both tend to go beyond the end of the post, and you would go into the comments and I'd have to scroll through your comments to find the rest of your post, and I'd finish reading it and I just went down this rabbit hole of reading your posts and I just love them. So for anyone who doesn't already follow you, go check her out at Marathon Mother, right? That's your handle at Marathon Mother. And you will not be able to stop reading. They're just really cool. So thank you for your vulnerability in that to start with. But there's so many things I could start with to ask you about, being the Israeli national champion in the marathon and half. You have a 2:32 marathon, a 1:15 half, a mother of, count them, 5 kids, being in ultra-Orthodox Judaism, which modest dress is required, has kind of been something that you've known for. You've also been known for running a marathon 7 months pregnant, which I didn't know that either, in a skirt and a long sleeve. There's so many things I could start with, but is there anything you want to add to that you would say kind of either sums you up or is something important to you that I could mention to the listeners before we get going?
Just that it's so funny because I'm a really new runner. You know, I only started running 4.5 years ago or something like that. And I sometimes feel like I'm just still discovering this whole new world, you know?
Yeah, I would believe that. And, you know, in that way, it's pretty impressive what you've been able to do, because I would say most new runners make all these mistakes, just one after the next, even if people have warned them not to make those mistakes, even if they've read about it and they know better, most runners tend to just fall into those holes. And I'm sure many of the listeners who are newer runners have experienced some of those holes, but you seem to have either dodged them or gracefully made your way through them, which is even more impressive with your story. And, I don't want to go over how you got into running because I feel like that has been covered. I will put a link in the show notes to an 8 on Ali on the run. So I'll put a link to that one, and Run Further and Faster. I think that is the name of the podcast. And there was one other running one.
Been on a bunch, but I can't remember now.
Okay. Well, anyway, I will put links to those two in the show notes because I think it's better. I prefer on my podcast to kind of go deeper than just kind of the stories that people have heard before on other shows. So I want to begin with, moving to Jerusalem in 2008, becoming an Israeli citizen. Now, growing up in New Jersey and moving to Jerusalem, being an expat myself, I'm always interested to hear kind of how that happened and how people end up in a different country, because it's a pretty big choice to make. I mean, I know this myself. You give up a lot to move countries. And especially for both of us in situations like this, there's no, you're stuck there. You can't get back or to where you're from, no matter what you do or how much you want it. So tell us, how did that happen, moving to Jerusalem in 2008? And I'd also like to know, in part of this, have you been to Israel before meeting your husband?
Yeah, I totally would not have made the move to Israel without the fact that my parents were really, they wanted us to experience Israel, and they brought us to Jerusalem for all of the holidays, three times a year from when I was in high school. So I was really comfortable in Israel, and I knew Jerusalem really well. And then it's very much, it's the tradition, traditionally girls go to study in Jerusalem for a year after high school. So that's where I went. And when I came that year, I knew I wasn't leaving. I fell in love right away living there for a year. And I told my mom, I want to stay here. I want to get married and live here. And my parents were super supportive of it.
So you hadn't met your husband at the time. This was just you loving where it was.
Yeah. My husband says I was more strongly I was the stronger one about staying in Israel. He was kind of open about it. And when we dated, I was no, we're living here,
I like that you made that decision.
Yeah, it's true what you're saying about there's a huge cultural difference between America and Israel. And there are so many things you have to get used to living in Israel. And when people ask me about moving here, I always tell them it's not an easy move, but it's so worth it. If you, especially as a Orthodox Jew, and even as there are many Jews who come to Israel and fall in love, and it's a really amazing feeling to be in a country where everyone is your brother and sister, everyone has your back.
And is it now? Are your family still here in the US, or did any of them move over as well?
No, so I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and all of my siblings live here now.
Oh, wow.
And my parents pretty much moving here. They haven't officially moved. They spend some time in New Hampshire. They still spend about half their time in the States, but their plan is to really spend more time in Israel.
And are they both American? They were born in America?
Yep.
Okay. So that your whole family, that's really cool. I'm actually quite jealous, to be honest, because mine are all still in England. So I'm the only one still here.
You need to bring them all over, Tina.
Oh, my sister always jokes about becoming a nanny for my kids and moving over here. Even though she's married and by the time this comes out will have had her second child, she always jokes about moving over here because she loves America. And I honestly think my parents would move to America if they could. It's not quite as easy to get into America. I don't know how it is for Israel, but I think it'd be easier for me to move to, or for an American to move to England than it would be for an English person to move to America. I don't know that for sure, but that's kind of my viewpoint of it. So, okay, so that's pretty cool. You moved over there, and as you said, you know, a lot of adjustments, the culture change. It's interesting you mentioned about going on vacation a lot over there, because I did the same thing with America. We would always come over here for vacation, so it didn't feel that big of a deal. But I said the same thing to my mum when I came over here after my high school year. Like, I don't think I'm coming back, and so yeah, pretty similar, which is interesting. So after moving there, over the next 6 years, you had 4 children, which, I mean, having just had a second one, I can't even imagine having 4 in 6 years. I'm just so in awe of you. But you also raised them while working full time. So I want to ask you, did you find some extra hours in the day that no one knows about? Or how the heck did you manage that?
No, honestly, I don't even know. Sometimes I look back and like my life was just a blur, but I clearly wasn't taking care of myself. Like, I wasn't exercising, but I was also, I will say this. I know running like changed my life in so many positive ways, but I wasn't falling apart either before that. Like, I was in I held everything together somehow, you know, and like, I had really amazing experiences. I loved the jobs I worked in. I have so many amazing memories, like raising my kids it's hard, but having kids close in age is like a really big thing also. It's just fun, and they all have each other. And yeah, I loved those years so much also, you know.
That's good. And when you say you weren't taking care of yourself, you said you weren't running, you weren't exercising, but were you doing other things? Like, were you eating well? Were you taking some time for yourself? Or were you basically kind of surviving, switching from work mode to kid mode to work mode to kid mode with nothing else in between?
Yeah, no, I was in total survival mode. I'll be honest. I don't know. My self-care was the lowest thing on the list. I didn't really know too much about eating well or not. Like, it was very different. I also, for 2 of those years, I actually lived in Tucson, Arizona, and I hosted like 100 college students every week in my house, like home cooked meals.
Wow.
That was very intense. So I can't say that I was doing, you know, like I said, my own personal health was kind of on the back burner in a certain way, and it's not sustainable. And that's why I did have to make some drastic changes in my life, you know.
And was that where running kind of came from, or was that many years later? Did you start with something else to kind of give yourself some me time?
No, running was my me time. Running is what opened up the door for me to even think about eating healthy, taking time for myself, realizing how much I needed that like alone time, moving my body. Also, the only thing I did before I started running, I will say, is that I started working on healing. I had a diastasis from having, you know, every time I get. Yeah, but even after my second time, I knew about it before, and I worked on it after every baby. I would do certain things, but like after my 4th, I did an official program. I used the Bluetooth system online. It was very helpful, and that was one thing I did. That was really important.
And I'm really impressed that was the one thing you did, because I have to say, and I did do it until I was cleared. The postpartum pelvic floor, bringing everything back together stuff was literally the bane of my existence. Like, I hated it. So I'm really impressed that if you had one thing that's what you were really dedicated to in that craziness of 4 kids in 6 years and working full time, that you managed it to be that. So that's another thing I'm very impressed with you with. Now, for parents, selfishly asking this, for parents deep in that kind of young children, I'm drowning mode, what would be your advice now you can look back? And, you know, I should add at this point that there was a 5th. So having had 5, what would your advice be as a veteran mother?
There are 2 things I would say. One is that your kids read off your energy And everyone always used to comment how calm and easy, relaxed my babies are. And that's because I was a super relaxed mom. Like I mean, it's my personality, but I'm not uptight about like worrying if everything's perfect. And you really don't need to be. Like, no. Kids are so resilient. They thrive. Like, they just need you to be relaxed and loving. And, you know, everything you're doing is great. Like, don't overthink things. It's really not. I think the world makes motherhood out to be a lot more complicated than it is, and so many things to think about. There are certain things you need to. Raising children is raising a world. I agree, but like, don't worry too much. Like, be relaxed. And the second thing is just that those years go by so quickly, and they come back. And like, your kids only have one mom, and almost everything else you do can be replaced. But like, no one can replace you as a mother. And like, in those moments when everyone's like crying on the floor and you also want to just like cry, like close my eyes and be like, okay, be present. Like, look at those cute faces. Like, after they go to sleep, you're going to lay there and think how precious they are.
Yeah.
So like,
or watch videos of them because you haven't spent all day with them. Yeah.
It's hard. I know it's really hard. I'm saying, you know, and every stage has its challenges for sure.
Yes. Well, actually, it's funny you mentioned about being present in it, because the other day, both of mine were crying at the same time. And, you know, when I just had the one, when she wouldn't stop crying, I would just kind of like get a little bit angry, like, why won't you stop crying? And I'd want to like yell at her. And I'll admit, like, at times I kind of would be like, like, stop it, you know. But with the second one, I found a lot of the time when they're both crying like that, I just find myself laughing, which doesn't make the situation worse when she looks at me, the older one, and I start laughing. I mean, it doesn't help the situation because she's obviously wondering why I'm laughing. But at least then for me, that's my way of getting through it, to kind of be like, you know, this is actually quite comical, rather than it being, you know, stressing me out, like you said, to want to go just cry in the corner. So thank you for that advice. Very helpful. And, you know, easier said than done, but you are absolutely right. And I think most people listening, if they are on their first child, it's going to be especially hard to take that in mind. But I can definitely see the difference first to second. So as much as we can, and I'm sure beyond that, second to third, third to fourth, as much as we can do that, I think your advice is exactly what people need to hear. Now, once you did start running, you know, your kids are a little bit older, but you must have, having 5 kids, had things that come up. You had to miss days, not do as much as you would like. You know, kids are sick, things come up. How did you kind of let that go in your heart that you were missing things when you knew that it was, you know, you'd given away all these years to kind of dedicate to your kids, and now you finally had something for yourself, but at times it was unable to be possible because of kids? How did you get through that?
It's such a good question, because like, my personality is like, I'm so type A also, that like, when you know how you can be anal with your like running, the amount of mileage you need to do and stuff like that. But the thing is, my first marathon that I trained for, I really didn't know what I was doing, you know? So I wasn't very like strict with like a plan. As long as I got out like 4 days a week, that was like amazing. Okay. And like, I did not care. I had no one, like, I wasn't bound to a certain amount of time, a certain amount of miles every day. So like, there were times, one time I remember my daughter like fell, and it was Friday. My husband was watching them in the park. She fell and had to get stitches while I was out with my baby on a run. And he called me. So it was supposed to be my long run. Theoretically, I had to come back early. And I remember I was like madly pushing the stroller to come back, instead of having to get on the ambulance. And I didn't even think about it. It was just like, all right, this is what you do. You know, like I'm a mother first. So that would always come first, you know?
But did any part of you then the next day, just knowing runners, the next day be like, oh, I need to make that up? Or you were able to just say, oh, I missed it. Too bad.
No, in my first marathon trial, my first marathon training was I really wasn't like that. When I trained more seriously for the Jerusalem marathon, that was my 3rd marathon. at that point, and then that was when my fifth baby was like young, and there would be mornings where I'd go out and my husband would call me back and be like, she's crying, and she only nursed, she wouldn't take a bottle. He'd be like, I can't handle, she's crying, come back. Mm-hmm. And being like, so it was frustrating because I had gotten out, and but I think then I felt more like, okay, I have to make it up. But even part of me, I think one of the reasons why I have been successful is like, you have to learn to let go. Yeah. And like at the end of the day, and I always have so much going on in my day that I really don't get caught up in like, okay, this workout went bad or this split wasn't like, I don't even think about it. It's like the run's over and I'm on to the next thing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And what about the other way? Did you have any experiences where, things kept coming up and you were like, oh, I'll just miss today, or, oh, I'll just take an extra day. And then it kind of piled up. Some parents struggle with motivation because it feels like there's always something.
No. So thank God I really never got into that kind of cycle. People ask, I've been asked so many times, like, how do you always stay motivated? And it's so hard for me to answer that question because I just am really motivated.
Yeah.
And also now I have really huge goals. So it's like, and it's my job. So now it's like really easy. But the biggest thing I would say is when you're falling out of motivation is like to remember that the hardest moments are just getting out the door.
Yeah.
And get out the door, you could feel exhausted or like you could feel so not in the mood, but like I guarantee you will come back feeling better. So it's always worth it. Like put those shoes out the door,
Yep.
Just yourself to step out. That's all I say.
Yes. No, thank you. And that's so true, isn't it? Just getting out the door is the hardest battle of all. All right. So taking it one step further, for a runner listening who feels like they barely have time to breathe, they're in kind of a similar situation to what you were doing, children working full time. They love to run, but if they do their runs, it's basically leaving them no time for anything else personal. Anything you would say for that person who just feels like everything is on fast forward and they are just unable to keep up? And it doesn't have to be about kids. It could be just your career is really demanding. Anything else?
I would just say that you have to be careful to balance. Like if it depends, you can't get caught up in such crazy running goals if you don't have time to like breathe, because I think recovery is so important.
Yes.
And it's going to catch up to you. And like if running, and you have, and find that like you have to, there's a fine line between when running stresses you out and when running feels good. And don't get to the point that running stresses you out. Like I believe running should always be from a healthy place, a place of joy, a place of wanting, striving to discover yourself. What are you capable of? Pushing yourself to your limits, but not in a way that stresses you.
Thank you to Tracksmith for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. Now, my friends, I told you about the previous coupon code. We have now changed that. So for those of you who have been a fan of Tracksmith for way longer than I have, from the very early days of the brand, I know there's many of you listening who are those first supporters of the brand, I do now have a coupon code for you. I know you were feeling left out before. So if you use code FORREAL15, that's FORREAL 15, you can get $15 off your first purchase of $75 or more. Now, I've told you about how much I love the clothes. I've told you about how I'm always wearing the Twilight tank, the Horizon tank, the session shorts all day long in just my daily life, so that I can switch from mum mode to exercise mode really quickly. They're really cute clothes. They're simple and just really effective, made of nice materials. I've told you about all that stuff, but I've been starting to tell you a bit about some of the other things Tracksmith is doing beyond just kind of those basic being a brand that provides products for us kind of things. They have actually now created a run commute set of clothes, which are fantastic. I love the idea that Tracksmith is encouraging people to run to get from point A to point B, as it kind of should be, rather than us driving to the gym or driving to work when it's not very far away. Now, as people are starting to get back to work and starting to travel more to their workplaces, that are locally, this is a great time for you to be using their Run Commute collection. They have thought really hard about this stuff. It is functional. It is great quality, as with all the Tracksmith stuff. And I really think you're going to enjoy it. If you are someone who runs to work or has the potential to run to work, this is the great opportunity for you to give it a try. So be sure to check out their Run Commute selection of clothes there. And then also the amateur support program. I don't think I've mentioned this to you on the podcast yet, but they are now doing a support program for people who are going for the US Olympic track and field trials. They will give people a quarterly gear stipend, a membership to their Hair AC club, mentorship, competition support, and more. That's just for people who are up and coming, those athletes who are well on their way. And it's those who are focusing on the US trials and are just, putting in the work every day. The people who are digging down deep to find the time within their own lives, but still trying to work a full-time job or have a family or whatever. I really think this is fantastic what they are doing. And I think you should read up a bit more on that if you have not already. Now, one final reminder, you can get $15 off your first purchase of $75 or more by using code 4REAL15. That's $15 off your first purchase of $75 or more using code 4REAL15.
Like, I believe running should always be from a healthy place, a place of joy, a place of wanting, striving to discover yourself. What are you capable of? Pushing yourself to your limits, but not in a way that stresses you.
Yes. Yes. Great. Thank you very much. So just thinking about your answers to those questions, does any part of you wonder one of two ways? What if you had been a runner prior to having any kids? How would you have treated that differently? Do you think you would have tried to squeeze a run in during that early childhood with working full-time zone? Or do you think you would have kind of said, you know what, I need what's best for me right now is to be present for my kids and I'm just going to back off? What do you think you would have done if you could have gone back? Or if you had been a runner before that?
I think it's interesting. Like, I wrote a post once a while ago that I said, I don't regret the fact that I wasn't like running marathons during the first 6 years of raising kids, because I think it would have taken away from me in a certain way. And like, I might have gotten so caught up into it, I wouldn't have had the same presence or ability to be there for my kids. I think I could have benefited from doing more exercise than I was doing, but, and I did go for the occasional jog. That's the truth. I didn't move at all. I didn't never move, but I didn't have running in the same way I do. And I think I would have benefited from getting out for runs at least 3 times a week in just a fun way, which is how it started.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to think about, isn't it? And then I'm sure there's the other part of you that is wondering, what would have happened if I would have started early, and where could I have been? Or maybe you don't. Maybe you feel, this was just the right time for you to start, and having all those extra years of running through high school, through college, kind of those years would have maybe led you to the point of burnout. Are you very much a person who believes things happen for a reason? Do you feel, you probably feel there's some kind of divine intervention, essentially. What are your thoughts when it comes to kind of decisions like that of starting running and running coming into your life at the point it did?
Yeah, I almost never think about the what ifs or the past. I 100% do believe that everything in my life is happens according to God's plan for me.
Yep.
And it rarely crosses my mind, but I do sometimes feel like I live 2 parallel lives, in the sense that when you become a professional runner, I'm sure it's like you delve into this whole world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't grow up with any of that. I didn't grow up with cross-country teams. I didn't grow up running in high school. I didn't go to college with sports. And there definitely is sometimes a part. I listen to lots of the professional runners and talk about their college experiences and the whole scene. And I'm only just getting into it now. And I'm hey, it would have been cool. I'm really curious. I have so little aerobic development under my belt. So obviously I'm also, I don't have, my legs are really fresh. Like I don't have a lot of, so thank God, like I haven't had injuries really, thank God. So, but there's a part of me that's definitely curious, like, hey, what would I be running if I did had all those years of like development,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's one of those things that you obviously said you don't let yourself think into that, but you could drive yourself crazy adding in what would happen if I did this? How would this change things? And I mean, I kind of believe it's the whole butterfly effect thing, that one tiny thing can have a massive ripple on your whole life. So yeah, we don't want to worry about those things too much, because it will just drive you crazy. Now, mentioning that, you said and I noticed that you kind of mentioned a few elite runners in various things that I'd seen about you. Now, a 2:32 marathon is damn impressive. Puts you about 76th in the world in the marathon. Well, that's what the stat you had. I don't know where that number has changed since, but do you ever struggle with imposter syndrome when you look at the world stage, kind of saying like, that's good. And to most people, to most of my listeners, that is incredible. But then when you look at people like Jordan Hussey, who I saw you mention at one point, does that ever make you think like, oh, wow, I'm nowhere near her level? Or do you feel peace with that?
It's a good question. Like, I don't think I struggle with imposter syndrome, because like I am who I am, and my goal is to become the best version of myself, but I definitely think like, hey, and I know like I'm not on the highest level at all. Like there's fun, like and I don't think I can't, maybe I know I can continue to improve, and I know like it's something I hope I can continue to achieve, but yeah, I definitely sometimes feel like, oh, I'm nowhere near them. And I don't run anything close to that, and I can't get into certain races the way other runners can. And I don't have the same opportunity. It's hard being in, there's a lot less opportunity in Israel in a certain sense. So yeah. I think one thing that's hard is like seeing all the like amazing altitude training camps, and like just the amount of time that it's when you're a mom of 5, you just don't have which is fine, but sometimes so I try really hard not to like compare myself most of the time.
Yes. No, I think when we all look back, when you have had kids and you look back on the time where you didn't have kids, and like I often find myself thinking like, what exactly was I doing with my days?
Oh my gosh, literally I have same thought, literally. Yes.
But then to people listening who don't have kids, they're probably thinking, you can't be that much different. And, maybe that's true. It is funny how a perspective changed. Now, you mentioned there about training in altitude. Now, you did go to Mammoth at some point. Tell me about how that experience was after being in Israel for many years, and how did the opportunity come up?
Yeah, Mammoth was so amazing. Last summer, I got some funding from Israel for myself, and a little bit, not really covering all my family's costs, but we went to visit family, and we decided it was like worth it to travel to America. And then it was just such an incredible opportunity. Mammoth is so beautiful. The running there is amazing. And it gave me a different focus in my days. And I do think that the first time you do altitude training, you don't necessarily, it can affect your body differently. And then also, I don't think it was, I struggled for a while with low iron, because I discovered celiac disease halfway. So it took me a very long time I don't think my iron was high enough even when I went to do altitude. And if I do it again, now I'm in a better place. I think I'd get a better effect, but it was just an overall, an incredible experience. And we had such a great time with the kids. And I'm a huge nature lover, and I love bringing my kids out to be with nature. And that's my ideal family vacation. So in my dreams, cool. Mammoth and Israel in one place would be really cool.
How long were you there when you went last summer?
3 weeks, exactly.
Okay.
A little. Yeah.
Okay, so you probably didn't really even get the time to where you would have kind of come through the the other side of going through the transition of altitude training during that point, but still just, yeah, nice to hear that you had such an amazing experience.
No, my coach felt like 3 weeks was good. I also didn't feel like I felt pretty good in the, from early on. But yeah, I think if I could ever, obviously people do it longer and it's probably better.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe next time, right? So I want to talk about the first marathon where you kind of really transitioned into the limelight, or kind of solidified yourself at the level that you are. Now, this story has been covered before, so I don't want to go into it in too much detail, but you were told by your coach to keep your pace conservative until close to the end. You kind of, I wouldn't say ignored your coach, but kind of maybe pushed that advice aside around halfway, started to pick it up a bit early. Now, rather than covering what happened in that story, although we can cover that briefly, I want to talk about the fact that you wrote on your post afterwards about how you were filled with fear. There was all these what ifs. Your coach's warning was ringing in your ears, but yet you switched your thinking to, I can do this, saying to yourself, fear holds us back, belief propels us forward. Tell us how you switched out of that thinking, because once you get into that doubt mindset, it's really easy for it to spiral out of control. So how did you pull yourself back when you knew you had committed to this but you would maybe pay the price for it?
It's interesting. So I don't feel like it was a one-off thing. I feel like I had been preparing for that moment, like for an entire month, leading into that race. And that was like in the thought, basically, I actually listened to this like really powerful Jewish class, which is like kind of based on very deep, like Jewish principles that we could actually like affect our own reality through our thoughts, speech, and action. And I had like pretty much meditated every day on this, like, and it was like, I was affecting the blessing that God's going to send me in my life, and like creating kind of my reality in the sense that like, I felt I was going to win this race. Like that was my goal. And I could visualize it. I could feel it. I had prayed for it. And I wanted to really I wanted to run the 2:45. And when that moment came where pretty much I had no option but to catch up to the woman in front of me, right? That's why I needed to go faster at the halfway point if I wanted to have any chance to catch her. I remember it was just so clear in my head, like, I can do this. And I didn't even let the doubt enter my mind, because it's so true. As soon as you even like voice those thoughts, you give them like any kind of existence, like you let them take up space, you'll start to doubt yourself. So all I was like focusing on was like the words in my head were like, God is with me every step of the way and anything is possible. And I 100% believed it. It's crazy. It was such a mind-blowing experience in that sense, because I saw how much my belief completely allowed me to do something, like to transcend like the physical parameters of what I was capable of.
So do you feel that you kind of ran, I don't want to say like people say like out of your mind or out of your body, like you ran beyond what you're physically capable of? Or do you think you just ran that, having that thinking allowed you to run to the potential that you were capable of on that day?
No, I really think I ran beyond what I was capable of, because I hadn't trained for anything close to that. Like, it was actually my coach now, who wasn't my coach then, but he was a judge on the course. He's like an amazing coach. And he was like looking at all my training logs leading into that race. And he's an atheist, he said to me after, he's like, there is seriously no physiological explanation for how you ran the way you did. Like, I can't even begin to understand it. And there's no way to explain it. He said, in his words, he was like, it was a miracle.
Yeah.
So, but that's what I say, the power of your mind and, is really, it's really incredible.
So what did that tell you going into future races? Like, were you able to say to yourself, remember that race that I ran beyond what I was capable of. This is how strong I am mentally. How did you use that as you moved forward into future races?
Well, the truth is that I've actually had to kind of tell myself most races are not going to be like that.
Yeah.
Because I was also, the thing is, I wasn't training as close to my potential. Like my coaches I wasn't fully aware of what I was capable of. So I went out so conservatively that I did have, I definitely had extra reserves in me for the second half. And when you want to race to get your maximum out, it's going to be hard. Like it's going to feel really intense.
Yeah.
You know about it. So that race didn't feel I felt really good the whole race. And I've had to teach myself, like, most of the time you're not going to show up and surprise yourself. But obviously, like, I always, that mantra has stayed with me for every race since then. And I always tell myself, like, first of all, you never should give up on yourself because you never know what you could bring out. Like, even when things get tough, even when it looks like the odds are against you, like, you have no idea, both in a workout and in a race. And I constantly say, like, yeah, God's with me. Anything's possible. Believe in it. And it's powered me through lots of situations.
Yeah, no, that's so cool to hear. And thank you for saying about, just being able to kind of keep going when you don't know if you can, and feeling so good, but then not always feeling that way. I think for a lot of people listening, it's kind of like when you're doing some kind of training repeats and the first few feel, oh, this was pretty easy. I feel strong. But then as you go on, it gets harder and harder to even maintain the same pace, let alone to speed up or pick it up. And I think that's kind of something that as we do reach our potential in our heads, it sounds like, well, I'll just train harder and then it'll feel the same, but it doesn't. You have to kind of work even harder to shave off even smaller chunks of time because you are getting closer and closer to what your body is capable at that time. So thank you for sharing that. And I do want to go into kind of your approach more in just a minute. But before we get to that, I think it was the post after the one about that race, you said about that you'd looked at people who had achieved success and seeing a common thread in their stories. They weren't afraid to take risks. They jumped into something even if the water was above their head. They believed in their dream and vision and ran with it. I'm glad I rose above my fear, conquered the voices in my head, and chose to take that leap. So for someone listening who hears that and thinks, wow, that's so inspiring, but I can't do that. I just can't. I freeze in that moment when it comes to that decision. Do you have any advice for someone to break through that?
Yeah. There are still things that I hesitate to take risks on. I don't think that like it's an easy thing. Mm-hmm. And even though actually, like, as a person, like, I'm really not cautious. I'm risk averse. My mom always says, like, I'll endanger my life. But I think that if you're struggling, that you should practice with small things where the risk is not that great, but practice taking a leap and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. That's the biggest thing I would say. And then once you feel safe doing that, you can take it to the bigger decisions. And then I think it's really important to have a supportive friend, supportive family, like a mentor, someone who can give you that like extra boost of confidence when you need it, because I don't think we can do things alone. I think we need support.
So true. So true. Thank you so much. All right. So training, you train in modest attire, you race in modest attire, necklines covering your collarbone, sleeves covering your elbow, skirts covering your knees. And as a married woman, you're always going to run in a headscarf that covers your hair. Now, you've said that this helps you feel empowered and shows you and shows the world that female athletes don't have to expose their bodies to win races, to run fast. So expand on that, of how you find that empowering, because most of what we see is kind of the other way. You've got to show your body. You've got to be proud of your body and put it out there. But as I'm sure many of my listeners can attest to, that might not necessarily help someone feel more confident in themselves. It might make them, they might prefer to dress in a way that makes them feel strong and makes them feel empowered. So can you expand on that a little bit about why you feel that way?
Yeah, it's just funny because today, as you're describing it, I was thinking, oh my gosh, that just sounds so hot. And today it was like one of the hottest days, and I ran a workout, and like I was so hot by the end. I like poured water on myself, which is always a bad move when you're wearing clothes because it like sticks to you even more.
Uh-huh.
And I was literally thinking like, and I did 200-meter sprints at the end. And I was like, I just want to rip off my shirt right now. So it's not always easy. I'm literally being so real here. But when you ask how it makes me feel empowered, what I just feel like is that there's not one way for a woman to feel comfortable. And many women afterwards told me that they wanted to wear skirts, but they always kind of felt embarrassed about it. So if someone wants to do something and then feels uncomfortable because it's not what everyone thinks is like, this is how you have to look as a runner, then I think the beauty is in diversity, in a woman saying, I can go out in my tank top, I can go out in my skirt, I can go out in my, head covering, whatever it is, a hijab or a scarf. I can go out in my long sleeves. I can go out in my leggings. I can go out in my crop top. But like, there isn't one way to look, and whatever makes you feel comfortable and beautiful, and like that's what you should go out doing. That's for me what female like empowerment is. And sometimes I think, yeah, the sports industry, like running industry, kind of gives us this like one picture of what a female running body looks like,
So the Black-owned business I want to feature for the week, you already know one of the founders of City Fit Girls is Takia McClendon, and she founded this business with Kiera Smalls. And you heard a little bit about what they do a few weeks ago, a lot of it about what they do a few weeks ago. It's primarily a group for people to meet, to feel inclusive and to feel like they belong. This is not your typical running group. However, we obviously realize that this is a bit of a strange time for running groups. City Fit Girls has a strength club, which is an online resistance training community for people who want to build strength, but don't have time to spend 1 to 2 hours in the gym or want to go to the gym, to be honest, right now. They're a community of runners, cyclists, fitness enthusiasts who want simple, efficient, and effective workouts that are going to help you build strengths. And it is very easy to join in. You don't need much equipment. You don't need a gym. You'll be able to do it from your home. You'll be able to feel safe, feel comfortable with this. It's just $10 a month. You can cancel anytime. They also have online coaching that you will have opportunities to go do. And you can build your strength, improve your fitness, start a running routine, run a race, and you will have your own coach with that. I also want to mention one more thing. There is group runs, as the group is pretty obvious with what it is all about. There's not too many of those going on right now, but in the future there will be. And I hope to be joining some of these in the future, and I hope you do too. There is plenty of things for you to go check out on the cityfitgirls.com website, including the Harvest Run, which is a 5K and 10-mile run, which you will be able to join them. It's a virtual race on November 1st. So you can go to cityfitgirls.com to learn more about City Fit Girls and to learn more about how you can help this Black-owned business for this week. Thanks so much for listening.
I think the beauty is in diversity, in a woman saying, I can go out in my tank top, I can go out in my skirt, I can go out in my head covering, whatever it is, a hijab or a scarf. I can go out in my long sleeves. I can go out in my leggings. I can go out in my crop top. But like, there isn't one way to look, and whatever makes you feel comfortable and beautiful, and like that's what you should go out doing. That's for me what female like empowerment is. And sometimes I think, yeah, the sports industry, like running industry, kind of gives us this like one picture of what a female running body looks like,
So for someone listening who thinks, okay, I hear what you're saying, but people always make remarks in what I wear, be it one way or the other, whatever it is. People don't make me feel good because, I feel all good about myself. I put on whatever makes me feel good. I walk out the door and then someone makes a remark or someone yells something at me. What would be your advice there?
It's funny. People always ask me if I've ever gotten comments about my clothing. And honestly, I can barely remember if any. I almost have never gotten any comments, and I definitely look interesting when I show up to a race. So I would say, I say it's obviously upsetting if someone comments on what you're wearing. I don't want to belittle that, but my biggest message is you do you. And I never live my life to please or worry about what other people are going to think, because at the end of the day, it's the only person that really matter. What I do is important to me. It doesn't matter what anyone else is really telling me,
Yeah.
So you have to learn to trust in yourself and be confident in yourself and ignore other people's opinions.
Yes.
I had to say it bluntly.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's obviously tough to do sometimes, particularly people who are kind of just at the beginning of their journey to remove people pleasing, which, I've been on this a few years now and it's still tough at times. But I think you're right that the more we can remove other people's opinions and remember that, their opinion of you is none of your business, then the better off we're going to be. Now, if this is an okay question for me to ask, had you stayed in New Jersey, do you think you would have felt the same way and you would have been running in the same attire? Had you never left the US and just continued to go on vacations to Israel?
Yeah, I think it's totally fine to ask. I grew up in a community where this modesty is just such a normal and accepted mode. I have to say that there's a concept of free choice where you free will, where you're doing things because you're choosing it out of, and I would say that for me, modesty is probably surpassed the level. I almost don't have free will anymore because I am so conditioned to it, so it's not something that I even think about. I wouldn't have questioned it. If I was living in New Jersey, I'd be running the same way.
So even on a hot day, like you mentioned this morning, you still probably would have been the same?
Yeah. Okay. The heat in New Jersey is for sure less than in Israel.
Yes, I would imagine that to be the case. Thank you. And then just as we've been covering this a lot lately, growing up in New Jersey and even... I mean, I have absolutely no idea about Israel, but we've been talking a lot about systemic racism, racist policies. Had you ever experienced anything based on your religious beliefs that you kind of either allowed to kind of affect you for a while, or straight away kind of said, no, this is me. I'm going to continue as I am?
I grew up in in a pretty insular community, so okay. I'm blessed in the sense that we didn't. Now, I think that there's a tremendous amount of anti-Semitism that exists, but I personally didn't really experience it until, and I'm a very positive person, so I don't like to bring out negative things. But the first time that I actually realized that it's kind of uncomfortable for me to talk about being religious was now, when I had to try and with the whole with the Olympic marathon situation. I don't know if we want to get into that, but just that was the first time that I spoke publicly about it. And it was
talk about it. Explain what happened.
Yeah. So my goal was to try and represent Israel in the Olympics, and the marathon is normally scheduled for a Sunday. And then I found out that because of they decided to move the outdoor events to Sapporo, and when they did that, they switched the date of the marathon to the Sabbath, and I don't do any work from Friday on sundown to Saturday after sundown. Mm-hmm. So when they when they postponed the Olympics and rescheduled them, I thought, okay, here's my chance to ask them, once they're rescheduling all the events, maybe they could just switch the date of the women's marathon with the race walk, which was on Friday. And I was not I didn't get any really helpful response from the technical delegate. They basically told me they can never take religion into any consideration. And then I was approached by, lawyers that I really should have some right in asking for this. And I decided to, the lawyers wrote a really respectful letter, and I decided to go public with my request. And it was really hard for me because I didn't realize like it's, I don't know, as much as the climate is like, we're talking about people being respectful and tolerant. I don't know I didn't feel like it applied so much like religion. Like I felt, not that I don't have, people are so supportive, but also I don't want to make, like I got, unfortunately, even in Israel, people were telling me like, oh, why do you have to be that Jew standing out? And I was like, wow. I'm not trying to bring negativity. I'm just I think that if there was another athlete, in 2012, they tried to accommodate the Muslim athletes. And if there was a Christian that came out and like, it's, I think there's ways, we've come very far, and I think we can try and work around these type of things if it does occur. And even if not, even if they can't accommodate me, I want to put it out there because I don't feel like any person should ever be afraid to kind of ask for some accommodation if they need to,
Mm-hmm.
for other young athletes, for other Jews in any field. And so it was more difficult than I thought it would be for myself.
In terms of people saying negative remarks back at you, or in terms of kind of the weight of using lawyers and having to go through all these official organizations?
I'm okay with people saying like negativity has never really gotten me down, but kind of just being like, deciding to make it a public thing and then questioning and hoping that it's the right move and that it's only going to bring, like, would never want to be, like not creating negativity for Jews publicly, or like just always hoping that it's the right thing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is a lot of pressure for you to be under, to feel, I mean, obviously you are not responsible for an entire group of people. That's kind of, in this day and age, we are kind of fighting for the fact that, yeah, we may represent some people, but we all have our own voices. And so like, it's hard for me hearing that you felt that kind of weight of not everyone was relying on you, but everyone was kind of like, please don't make things hard for us. Not that they were maybe meaning for it to be that way, but that's kind of how you internalized it. Is that right in my assessment there?
Yeah, I got some of the feedback. I will say that the overwhelming majority of the response I got was very supportive.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to be, so again, like I think I'm happy with my decision. I mean, I felt like I at least might as well try,
Yeah.
and again, it wasn't like I'm coming here like the Olympics needs to bend over backwards, but there were several different precedents why it made sense for me to ask. And so I did. And you know what, at the end of the day, what do I have to lose?
So what is going to be your decision if they do not move it, if nothing changes? Is that kind of, you have to say, I'm sorry, but I have to pass this up?
Yeah, if nothing changes and the marathon is still on Shabbat, then I won't be able to run. And I'll just hope that I'll have another opportunity in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I've missed out on different I missed on the World Championships this year. The women's marathon was, Friday night. I'm missing the Poland and the half marathon championship, which wouldn't even be my strongest event, but that's also, I'm not able to participate in that right now. But there are a lot of marathons that are on Sundays normally, and almost every race in Israel is on Friday. So I'm generally good.
Okay.
And I stay optimistic,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's worth definitely asking about and seeing what can happen and getting a conversation going. There's so many things that when the first person speaks out about them, it seems so kind of such a big deal. And it may seem to people like, why are you saying this? Why does it matter? But then more people kind of crawl out and say, hey, actually, I feel like that too. Or I think we need this discussion. And we've seen so many examples of that in in 2020, where it's initially seemed like such a big deal or such a small thing that people are making into a big deal. But then as people warm to the idea and kind of understand it, they think, actually, yeah, that is right. We should be talking about this. So I think this is just yet another example of that. And well done to you for being someone to speak out and use your platform to speak on behalf of some other people who have definitely missed out on things because of it in their own experiences. So thank you for that, because definitely admire people that speak out. Okay, so there's a few other things I wanted to ask you about, but timing wise, one of your things that I noticed reading about you that I'm very passionate about as well, which I don't think you've talked about anywhere else, is that you have this mission to help children struggling with mental health and raise awareness for this, which I'm all about raising awareness for this. So tell us a bit more about why you feel that's an important area to focus on, and if there's anything you think any of the listeners can do to kind of help with this important cause.
Well, it's really close to home because my 14-year-old cousin, she took her own life after struggling with anorexia. And this was after she came out of the hospital, and then she didn't have anywhere to go. She needed to get back to regular life, but she wasn't ready for school, and there was no transition for her way to end. And it was so devastating to see that. And her family is amazing, just an amazing family. And they were so lost. And her mother decided, in her memory, to create this kind of rehabilitative place for children struggling with any kind of mental health issue, to help them exactly transition from the hospital to normal life. And I see it's filling such an important niche, because the hospital is this place of pathology. And when a kid comes out of the hospital from with mental health issues, they're literally at the lowest point in their life, and they can't recognize the good in themselves. And the place she created is called Beit Daniela. Daniela was my cousin's name. And they have dog therapy and horse therapy, and everything they do there is about building them up. And to me, it's just such an important mission, because I think today more than ever, people are struggling with mental health across the board, and kids. And it's not something we need to hide. We need to be aware of it. We need to find creative solutions for it. And, I'm not doing so much, but if there's anything I could do, by raising awareness, I raise funds for Beit Daniela. I spread the word about it. And to me, it's just a blessing that I can use my running to kind of make a little bit of a difference for these kids.
Okay. I will put links in the show notes for people to go check that out. And thank you for saying that. And I think in some ways it's difficult for us, of a certain age, anyone above maybe 25, to understand exactly what kids today are going through with the way that social media and the way that kids are so intertwined with technology and phones and all that. We would have grown up, anyone above that would have known a life without that stuff, and not having gone through those so sensitive preteen, teenage years, having technology and being able to never really switch off. I mean, I think about this often with kids and teenagers having their phones. Once they have a phone, you can't escape. You can't go home to your family and then be away from someone who's maybe bullying you or saying mean things, because your phone is right there. And you can put it aside, but we all know that technology and particularly phones have been created with this kind of addicting thing that you can't help but check it often. So I do think about that often, and how that affects mental health within children. So thank you for speaking out about that. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, I'm just really grateful that you brought it up, because most of the time people just want to ask me about running, and it's very important to me. So thank you.
So, and then one other thing related to that, especially as you just said about your cousin, there was a post you put up recently about gaining a little weight, which initially a lot of people listening, myself included, has been through this, would have that thought of, I've gained a little weight, I need to cut calories, I need to get it back down. And you even noted that yours had been muscle gain, and yet you still felt, I need to cut down. Now, you obviously managed to pull yourself back out of that before you kind of headed down a path. But what would be your advice to someone listening who maybe sees a higher number on the scale than they want and thinks this is the way to be faster? Now, we've covered this a lot on this podcast, but it's been a while. So you, as just kind of learning from you in this episode, loving getting to know you, and being the fact that you're a 2:32 marathoner, what would be your advice to the listener who kind of sees that number, especially after this kind of heavy time of 2020 and feels they need to lose weight?
I've listened to you ask this question so many times to professionals, but you know what? It's really helpful for me to hear because we need that reminder, because it's like still, I think I'm very lucky that like my personality doesn't really allow me to like go down that path. But first of all, throw out scales. Like they're so useless.
Yes.
No scale. Second of all, like I feel like listening to your body is so important. Like everyone talks about fueling. Fueling's really good. I try and eat like healthy food, but like if I want a bowl of cereal for dinner, like I can just tell that's just what my body wants to eat. I don't know. It's very powerful, and I sit down and eat my bowl of cereal. I just did that tonight. And like, I'm sure tomorrow I'll want a salad. Like it balances out, know?
Yeah.
Once you get to like, obviously I think you have to create healthy habits. Like I didn't always eat so well. And I built into like really trying to have 3 nourishing meals and snacks and just like, just good wholesome food. Like I happen to, so once I started doing that, like there's always also that I'm a big, like, one thing is not going to say, if you're craving chocolate, have a piece of chocolate. Like it's not gonna ruin anything, things in moderation. And, there was a time when I trained for my marathon in Tavaria, the first really serious marathon. I ran the 2:42. I was definitely at my lowest weight that I've ever been. I was very, and I wasn't as muscular, but like I really made a conscious effort in that training cycle to try and like eat really healthy. And like I probably underfueled. Like I just wasn't, I know that I was I can even see a difference in the pictures. And sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I was so skinny. I kind of wish I was like that skinny. Like it looked really skinny. And now I'm just like a little more heavy. But then I remind myself, like I'm running a lot faster right now. And I run high mileage. I swim, I strength train. I can't do all of that without, giving my body the energy it needs. Yeah. So when that voice comes up, I just say like, you're doing really well right now. And like, forget about trying to cut out calories, like listen to your body, fuel yourself. And that's the most important thing.
So just to be devil's advocate here, and because I know this, you said about you running really well right now, you're running faster than you ever have, but what about in the tough moments when things aren't going well, or in the future, if you are having a rough moment, what are you going to say to yourself if you're in a tough patch and then you see a photo of you looking, like you said, you thought skinnier, even though I would be willing to bet that most of us would not, if we looked at someone else, we would not be able to see the difference in what we see in ourselves as skinny and not skinny. I'm sure it's like such a tiny difference that only because we know ourselves so well, we can see. So like, I wouldn't be able to see a difference in your pictures that you would. But what would you say to someone or to yourself in the future, if you are having a rough period and then you see those photos and you think, well, maybe I should control my eating more?
So I think to remember that restricting your food is not going to help you. Like you need the calories to perform at your best. I do believe though, like that I like to work in like kind of like cycles, like or like periods. I don't know if I'm training like 12 weeks for a marathon, like I do think it's okay to be extra kind of focused on nutrition during those 12 weeks. And then I'll take like a week off after. If I have a race, I'll have like a week off of just like eat whatever I want. Like and for myself, I like having some kind of like more focus and then like no restriction in a certain way. I'm not saying restriction really, but I'm saying just like, I'll ask, like, I would pass up on like, I wouldn't be baking like a lot for like, we have a Thanksgiving dinner like every week, the Sabbath,
Mm-hmm.
So I'd just be like more kind of conscious of what I'm eating versus like the 2 weeks after a big build up where I'm just like, okay, enjoy yourself,
But
I don't know.
Would still like if it was your birthday, you'd still have something to eat to celebrate on your birthday, even if it was during a training block.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I did before my birthday was the month before my Cape Town marathon. My husband made me really good strawberry shortcake. It was delicious. I ate it.
Very nice.
I ate like half of it.
Well, good. I think you definitely can enjoy that as much
and
as you
I enjoyed it. You have to, and always remember, like, I think it's so, if you're finding yourself going to the unhealthy place too often, then get help before it becomes disastrous. Because obsessive thoughts could take over.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I'm not in that place, and I don't think I'll get to that place now. But I was like in high school, I did deal with that, and it's very uncomfortable. So I would say really get yourself the right help so you can avoid going down that, path.
Yes, and I will put links in the show notes to episodes with Sarah Canny, Jessie Haggerty, and Meg Steffi Schreier. Nancy Clark, Renee McGregor. Who else I've done? Like you said, Jennifer Gaudiani, which is probably the number one I would recommend. Yeah, I've done so many of these. So I'll put lots of links in the show notes for anyone who does recognize that. All right, Beatie, what would you like to tell the listeners, anyone, as this is a running podcast primarily, and we haven't covered everything, what would you like to tell them to remember within their own running lives as they kind of go forward with just believing in yourself? You're so good at building people up. So to finish, I'd love to hear you give some advice for the listeners.
I will just say that everyone talks about, progress is in baby steps. So I want to describe to you what baby steps means. For the past 4 weeks, I've been like running a 200 meters at the end of every workout. So I do like at least like 10 kilometers of workout. And then at the end, we do like the short repeats, just 200 meters and every week my coach wanted me to run a sub 30-second 200 meters. Okay. Now this is what baby step progress is. The first week I ran 30.6. The second week was 30.4. Okay. The third week is 30.2. This week I was convinced I was going to go sub 30 and run a 29-second 200 meter. And guess what I ran? 30.06. Okay. But that is still progress. Okay. It's like 2 milliseconds. It's not a second even, but it's progress. Just means that every week I'm getting a little bit more controlled. My form's getting a little stronger. And I don't even look at it like, I don't think you have to be even caught up in like every day, but just remember that every day you get out there and you run, you're making progress in one way or another, and keep moving forward. And always find the joy in running, like run with joy, because it's about enjoying it, moving your body and being grateful for what our body can do.
So true. Great advice. Thank you so much. All right. Where can people go find you? We mentioned Marathon Mother on Instagram at the beginning. Where else can people go?
I have a Facebook page, Beatie Deutsch.
Okay.
That's it. I'm not going to TikTok, and Twitter is not for me either.
Yeah, no, don't worry. I'm not definitely. I'm not feeling TikTok either. All right. Well, thank you so much for just your big heart, for being such a good role model, and for teaching us just how to keep on trying and keep that balance while we do. I appreciate you, and look forward to seeing what the future holds for you.
Thank you so much. This was amazing.
My friends, if you have a minute and you could leave a review on your favorite podcast player, Apple Podcasts, aka iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or whatever else podcast player you use to listen to this podcast, or if you would subscribe to this podcast, you will help me get out in front of new runners to make our tribe even bigger and even better. It might not seem like you as one person can make a difference, but really it helps a lot. And it shows me you appreciate the hard work I put in for those. Thank you so much. She is awesome. I love her energy. I love her enthusiasm. I love the fact that she has 5 kids and she doesn't let that hold her back. And she's had those 5 kids in the time she's been training as a professional runner. Just amazing. And I love what she said about fear holds us back, belief propels us forward. I need to repeat that in my head over and over again. And there's so many other things I wanted to ask her about, but we just kind of ran out of time. So I'll have to bring her back on in the future. And I really look forward to seeing what she gets up to in the future. Now, I just want to give a shout out to Tracksmith and Athletic Greens. You can get $15 off your order of $75 or more by using code 4REAL15. That's FORREAL 15 at tracksmith.com. You can also go to tinamuir.com/tracksmith and check out my favorite items. You can go right to the site from there. I also want to thank Athletic Greens, who give me my 75 whole food source ingredients every single morning. It's the first thing I do when I wake up. I love hearing you saying that you've tried it and love it, and now it's a part of your routine as well. It is a game changer. You can go to athleticgreens.com/Tina to go check out more and get a 1 year supply of D3K2 with your first purchase. And then finally, I just want to give a shout out to City Fit Girls, which was Takia McClendon's business that I mentioned a few weeks ago. I am excited for this to be the featured business of the week because she has some amazing programs on there, and I wanted to make sure I gave a shout out to her as this is her business. So you can check out those links and everything else in the show notes by going to tinamuir.com/episode 205. And I will next week be covering climate change, or the climate emergency, in pretty serious detail. I have one of the top experts in the world, a climate psychologist who has started the climate mobilization. Look it up in the meantime. She is a big name in this, I don't want to say industry, it's not even an industry, in this waking up, in this kind of sounding the alarm. And it's going to get serious and it's going to be a little in your face, but please stay with me and go listen to this episode. It is possibly the most important episode I have ever or will ever do. So I hope you will listen to that one next week. If you have not already subscribed, go do that so it comes right to you, because I have a 7-week podcast series starting the following Monday, which is going to cover guests from the Eco Challenge World's Toughest Race. And every one of the people I reached out to said yes. And I'm quite excited to share their story with you, let you get to know them. These are incredibly inspiring people. I will be telling you more about that next week. But in the meantime, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on Friday.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.